Hello everyone, so today I am here to do my favorite video of the year, everyone's favorite video, and that is the best books of last year of 2020. I read a lot in 2020. It was probably my most books I've ever read ever. I hit like 230 or something like that. So I read a lot of books, so I have a lot of favorites. It's also definitely like my longest favorites list ever. I just read so many freaking great books. I honestly had planned to do like a video for fiction favorites and then like one for like classics and non-fiction, but then I was like, no, I just kind of want to put them all together, so I did. And this video is gonna be super long. Go get yourself a cup of tea, a snack, something to entertain yourself or not get hungry while I talk. So I have a total of 20 books to talk about today, and this does not include any rereads. A lot of people were assuming that my favorite book of this year would be Imaginary Friend, but this was my favorite book of last year. I just happened to reread it this year. I know this looks like it should be in this video, which is why I'm holding it up. This was my favorite book of 2019. This video is not going to include any rereads because I did do a couple this year of favorite books, and it just wouldn't be fair to the new books if I only talked about rereads. So yes, I have a total of 20 books, and I do count downwards. I do have a order of these favorite books. And I think I have a very good like mix of books. We have some manga, we have some just fiction, we have a little bit of YA, we have classics, we have non-fiction. So I feel like this is going to be a really, really fun best books of the year video. So without further ado, let's just get on into it. First two favorites are manga series that I have literally not shut up about all year, so I'm going to make this quick. Number 20 on this list is Beastars by Haru Itagaki, and this is a manga series I've been reading basically the whole year, and I've absolutely loved it. I keep up with it, so this is an ongoing manga, and I think actually 9 volumes of this are currently out, and I absolutely love this series. If you don't know what this is basically about a world where everyone are different animals, and I was kind of describe it as a like Animal Farm kind of commentary with these animals in this world. Everyone is a specific animal, and it makes the politics and hierarchy and social like interactions of characters very, very different. So like there are carnivores and herbivores, and in this like world, carnivores don't eat herbivores, they eat like a kind of synthetic meat, because obviously if you eat the herbivores you're like kind of committing murder. But at the very beginning of this series, an herbivore is murdered at this boarding school that our main characters go to, and the carnivores are the ones being accused of this murder. And we follow our main character, Legoshi, who is a carnivore, and he's like an absolutely massive gray wolf, so a lot of people are very terrified of him, but he's actually just this really sweet, innocent boy who's in love with this teeny tiny little white rabbit. And it kind of goes into like the dark like politics of this world and lots of like gangs and violence and stuff, but it also is just a very cute high school romance. I think this has an amazing balance of the kind of shonen like violence battle sequences, interesting politics and stuff like that, but also just really cute shoujo like cutesy romance, and you're rooting for people all the time. And it's really cute, so I really love that one. Number 19 is of course Comey Can't Communicate. This is another manga series that I've been keeping up with all year, and I absolutely love it. This has 10 volumes out currently, and again, this is one that I'm keeping up with. It is ongoing, and this one is the most wholesome shit you'll ever read in your life. This basically follows a young girl named Comey in her first year of high school, and she has a communication disorder. She has a lot of social anxiety, and she finds it very, very difficult to talk to people. But her goal in high school is to make 100 friends, and she meets this boy like in her first week of school who also wants to help her achieve this goal, and it's basically just about her kind of overcoming her fears and her anxiety to be able to make new friends. And this is again just so wholesome and heartwarming. If you just need a good, just cute, fun read during this pandemic, this is the perfect one to reach for. So number 18, we're getting into some fiction, and that is The Ghost Bride by Yang Zichu. This is one of the first books that I read in 2020, and I literally was like, this is gonna be on my favorite books of the year, and look at it, it's on the favorite books of the year. Yang Zichu is an author that I have absolutely loved in the past with their book The Night Tiger, and I was really interested in this book actually way before The Night Tiger, but I finally got my hands on a copy of it this year, and I absolutely loved it. This is, I actually had it pitched to me by a subscriber who definitely made it get bumped right to the top of my TBR, which was Three Souls, aka my favorite book of all time, by Danny Chang, meets Spirited Away by Studio Ghibli. And I could not agree more with that statement. If you're a big fan of Spirited Away, I think you're going to love this book. This basically follows a young girl who is told by her parents that she's going to marry this dead boy, and basically explains that ghost brides were common this takes place in Malaysia and like in China and stuff. Ghost brides are a thing, but it's usually like, you know, you're in love and dating for a while before you get married and your husband happens to die, and then you still marry his ghost to be able to still be a part of his family, that kind of thing. But this girl has no idea who this guy even is. Like, they kind of knew each other as kids and that's about it. And then she goes into the spirit world to kind of talk to him, and he's just this very angry little ghost boy. And it was so interesting. The spirit world definitely reminded me of Spirited Away, and I highly recommend this one. It's so good. It was so fun and fast-paced, and I absolutely could not put it down. Next up, I have Docile by K.M. Spara. And this is a book. Oh, I love this book. I honestly, this entire year, I was really expecting this to be really high up on my list, but I just read some amazing books this year. But yeah, this book, I feel like I always say this, a lot of people are going to find this book like problematic and are going to read like the first 100 pages, call it problematic, and DNF it. Kind of like the Captive Prince series by C.S. Picot. This book follows a world where there's this drug called docilin that makes humans more docile and submissive, and basically in this world it's very popular to kind of sell yourself into servitude to pay off family debts and stuff, and we follow a young boy who basically does that same thing. He's not a young boy, he's an adult man, but you know, he's a young adult, and he sells himself into a lifetime of servitude, and he refuses to take this drug that makes it kind of bearable. And then you meet the man he sold himself to, and he is the creator of docilin. And basically half of this book is him absolutely trying to destroy and break down our main character, and he succeeds. And it's terrifying and horrible, and like the amount of gaslighting and manipulation is insane. But I also think this book is so important for those reasons, to kind of be able to see examples of these things happening. And yeah, I love this. A lot of people I think say that the ending wraps up a little bit too easily, which I do agree with, but I absolutely loved it so much more than I was expecting to, so loved it. And then this year I was just like everyone else, and I read Becoming by Michelle Obama. This is Michelle Obama's memoir, and I absolutely loved it. I feel like I don't need to say much about this. If you haven't read this, it is 100% worth the hype. People keep trying to say that this is like a political memoir. It's not. I would call it Promised Land by Obama very much a political memoir, because he is literally just going through his time in office. But this follows Michelle so much more as like a child and a young adult before she meets Barack. But yeah, she is so inspirational and fantastic, and I love her so much. And this memoir was amazing. I do recommend the audiobook because she does read it herself, but I love this. If you haven't picked this up yet, you gotta. And next up, I have The Little White Bird by J.M. Barrie. This is another one that I read really early on this year. This is basically the OG story of Peter Pan. If you guys somehow don't know, I wrote my entire thesis on Peter Pan. My focus in academic like literature and scholarship is Peter Pan, and this is actually where Peter Pan originated. This is J.M. Barrie's like one of his earlier novels, and it tells the story of Peter Pan within this story, because it's a dad telling his son the story of Peter Pan. I loved this. Like, completely aside from Peter Pan, I thought that this is just a great novel and a great look at fatherhood and motherhood, and like just like I don't even know how to explain it. It was just such an interesting look at these things, because basically the father really hates the mom, and the child is obviously kind of in between this, but the parents are still married, and it was just such an interesting story, and it was so beautifully written. I highly recommend this one. I know a lot of people just kind of go for Peter in Kensington Garden, which is about like, you know, 60 pages of this book that is the story of Peter Pan, but I think the whole novel is honestly really worth the read. And yeah, I loved it. It's so good. That was one of the classics that I read at the very beginning of the year that really made me go, huh, I might be able to read classics, because I enjoyed it so much. Next up, we have another one that's kind of in the vein of Docile, that a lot of people think this book is problematic, but I think it's so important, and that is My Direct Vanessa by Kate Elizabeth Russell. Basically, this book follows a girl when she was in boarding school as a teenager and then as an adult, and in boarding school she was sexually assaulted by her teacher. Like, they had a sexual relationship together, and then as an adult she still believes that he loved her. Like, she does not believe what happened to her was assault. And basically this book takes place during the Me Too movement, so a lot of women are coming forward about past abuse, and a lot of women are coming forward about this teacher and saying that he had sexual relations with them. And she is just so delusional and is telling these women that they're lying and that he would never do that because he's in love with her and that kind of thing. And I think this was just so important. It was one of those books that it's like reading from someone else's point of view that's very different from your own, just opens your own eyes so much to understanding the other side of a conversation. I totally don't agree, and I think this woman in this book is absolutely insane and delusional and needs help, but I do think that this was really well done and really just a fantastic conversation. It also is blurbed by Louise O'Neill, and I was just about to say I would compare this to Louise O'Neill's Only Ever Yours, which was one of my favorite books in past years. So yeah, this is fantastic. I loved it. Am I gonna end every single book review like that with I loved it? Probably. Next up, I have a classic that my boyfriend and I both read this year and absolutely loved, and that is Perfume by Patrick Süskind. And this is a book that it's a classic. It's a book that I think a lot of people in Europe read for required reading. A lot of people have been saying that in my comments, so a lot of people don't like this book because it was required reading, but as an adult who just read it for fun, absolutely loved it. This follows a boy who is born in the slums of Paris, and he's born without a scent. Like, he doesn't smell like anything, but then he also grows up and has an insanely good sense of smell, so he wants to become a perfumist. And he's like a horrible person. Like, right from the get-go, he's a horrible person. And he like always thinks things smell horrible until one day he comes across something that smells absolutely wonderful, and he wants to capture that in a perfume, and it involves murder. And I think this book is just so fun. As weird as that sounds. I just think he was such a fascinating character, and this was such a unique and interesting story. I also just absolutely loved the imagery of Paris and other parts of France, because he does leave Paris eventually, and I just thought it was a good, fun time following this very strange man. And also the ending is one of my favorite endings ever. I just thought it was so over the top and ridiculous and hilarious a little bit and insane. Like, I love when endings just completely subvert my expectations of how it's going to end. Next up, I have a piece of non-fiction, and that is Disability Visibility by Alice Wong, and this is a bunch of essays written by disabled people, all put into a collection and edited by Alice Wong. Not all of them are by her. And this was so good. This was published this year, so it's a new release, and I think this is amazing if you are interested in getting into or learning more about the disability rights movement or disability in general. I thought this was fantastic. I did technically read it for my thesis, but like, I had plans to pick it up way before then, and I loved this. This has such amazing stories and conversations. If you can see, I have so many tabs. I have so many dog ears of like my favorite essays and stuff. This deals with every disability you can think of. We follow physically disabled people, people in wheelchairs. We follow a deaf person, a blind person, a couple autistic people who have written stories, and I just thought it was so good. And I think if you're interested in learning more, again, this is a really great spot because it does cover so much and so many very, very current and relevant conversations. So, great book. Next up is a book that a lot of people thought was going to be my favorite book of the year, because I asked on Instagram what people thought my favorite book of the year was, and a lot of people guessed this, which I was shocked at, but that is Kim Ji-young, born in 1982. This book is amazing. I absolutely love this book. Like, don't get me wrong. Again, it's on my favorite books of the year list, but it wasn't #1. But this is basically an amazing look at women's treatment. Like, it technically takes place in Korea, but I keep saying I think any woman anywhere would be able to relate to this. Basically, it follows a woman who basically has a mental breakdown, and then we go backwards and follow her life from when she was a child, and just basically all of the patriarchal bullshit she has ever had to go through, and misogynistic stuff that has ever happened to her just ever since childhood. And again, every single thing that happened to her, I was just sitting there like, wow, same. Because it's everything from just, you know, boys getting treated better in elementary school or being told that they're smart, all the way up to when she's an adult and she has a job that she's worked so hard to get and she's expected to give everything up to have a child. And out of all of the books on this list, I would say this is probably like the most important one that I would recommend. It's just, again, I think any woman would be able to relate to this book, as well as any man who reads it would just understand women better. I think this book is amazing. Highly recommend it. I loved it. How many times can I say that? The next book I have is actually a YA book. Wow. And that is Loveless by Alice Oseman. I love Alice Oseman. All of her books have been on my favorite books of the year that I read them, which is just so fantastic. I just love her so much. She just gets it. I absolutely love this book. This book follows a young girl who is in her first year of college, and she is learning what it means to be asexual and aromantic. And this book, it was just so good. The conversations were amazing. The representation on page was also amazing. We have a lesbian character. We have a pansexual character. Oh my gosh. She was a little bit stereotypical, and I think a lot of people didn't like her, but I personally thought she was great. And then obviously we have an aro-ace character. I used to identify as asexual. I still identify as demisexual. So this book just hit very close to home. I think anyone who has ever questioned their sexuality is just going to get a lot out of this book. It was just so perfect. I just loved it so much. And yeah, I feel like this is a very personal book. Like, it's gonna be one of those books either you absolutely love and you're gonna cry over, or you're gonna be like, that was just okay. I do recommend for queer people to check this out. Next up, a bit of non-fiction. I have Know My Name by Chanel Miller, and this is by the woman who was raped by Brock Turner. And basically tells her side of the story. She goes through the entire court case and everything that has happened, and also everything that's happened since the court case has ended. And just, she basically talks a lot about how her court case and the whole thing with Brock Turner basically signaled to a lot of rape survivors, like, what would happen if you came forward, which is not a good thing. Like, Brock Turner got off so easily because people felt bad that he was a white guy, and we were all ruining his life by putting him in prison where he belongs. And she talks a lot about how bad she feels that there wasn't a better outcome, and it's just such a powerful book. Obviously, so many trigger warnings for sexual abuse and assault and everything like that, and rape, and obviously the legal system and the treatment of rape victims. And yeah, I thought this book was, again, so important. This is another one that I think is just so incredibly important, so people should pick it up. But it was also fantastically written. The author was in school for creative writing, and you can tell she's a writer. And I just thought this was fantastic. Definitely one of my favorite nonfictions of the year. Next up, I have another classic. If you guys didn't know, I was trying to read a lot more classics this year, and I succeeded. So the next one that I have is The Hunchback of Notre Dame by Victor Hugo. I loved this book. Yeah, I feel like what can I say about The Hunchback of Notre Dame? Like, It's Notre Dame. Oh my god, I'm applying to Notre Dame, and I keep saying Notre Dame. I keep getting them mixed up. Notre Dame. And yeah, well, what can I say about this book? I think that this story is absolutely fantastic and timeless and just so wonderful. It's also horrific, the treatment of disabled people. I have thought about writing an entire essay about Quasimodo, maybe in the future. But I think the biggest thing that I love so much about this book is it absolutely transports you to Paris. I have never been outside of the United States, but this book is so descriptive and so good at showing Paris that it just absolutely takes you there. There's a whole part of this book that basically gives you a bird's eye view of the entire city of Paris. It goes on for a very long time, and I'm sure a lot of people got sick of it. I thought it was amazing though. And again, I just love this story. I think it's such a dark but also such a mesmerizing story. I think this book is also so accessible, especially as a classic. I thought that it was just such an easy and entertaining and fun read. Like, I was able to just get very lost in it every single time I picked it up. So I loved it. Speaking of a classic that I just got lost in every single time I picked it up, I have Bleak House by Charles Dickens. Yep, I read this book this year. Wow, look at all my tabs. It looks like nothing in this thick of a book. That's so funny. But yeah. Bleak House by Charles Dickens. This is one of those books that I feel like everyone has on their I will read that eventually list. But I decided to just go for it. Like, I don't know, it just called to me. I picked up a copy and I picked it up this year and I flew through this. I think I read it in only like a week and a half, like maybe like 10 days. It's funny to me because I think I've really disliked a couple of Dickens because I find his writing so meandering and unnecessary and pointless. But in this book, it worked for me for some reason. Like, again, this book, the literal plot that is described on the back of this book does not happen until 500 pages into this book. Like, it is so slow, and there is so much buildup, and there is so much unnecessary description. I feel like I should have hated this, but I read this kind of, not at the beginning of the pandemic, I think I read it in like April, so like early pandemic, and I just got absolutely lost in this book. I think I picked it up at the right time. Basically we follow, what's her name? Esther? Yeah. Basically this young girl, Esther, who is taken in as a ward of this wealthy man along with two other people, and she basically just kind of is like living her life in London. Her and the girl, oh my god, what was the girl's name? Her and Ada were lesbians. You can't tell me they weren't. I don't care if they both end up with men at the end. They are so fucking gay for each other and I loved it. But yeah, she is kind of best friends, lesbians, with the other female ward, Ada, and then there's also a boy who they try to set Ada up with and everything. And then she actually falls very ill later on. This is like the end, again, the description of the book, which is like 500 pages into it, but she gets very sick and it alters how she looks, and kind of it's her dealing with that and what those implications mean in London society and like marriage and everything like that. And I just thought that this book did what Charles Dickens tries to do with his other books, but like really succeeds. It just, again, I think this came to me at the perfect time and I absolutely loved it. Next up we have another classic, and yes, I read this book for the first time ever this year, and that is Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte. Oh my gosh, I love this book. I read this for my Victorian literature, Gothic literature class. It was so good. So basically my entire life I thought that this was just going to be, I honestly think I thought it was by Jane Austen because it's called Jane Eyre. I don't know. And I really hate Pride and Prejudice. Like, I really dislike Pride and Prejudice. And I thought it was just going to be another Pride and Prejudice kind of story, which I think is really boring. This book is so good. This is another one that I just got absolutely lost in. I would sit down to, you know, read the designated 50 pages that I needed to that day, and I would just fly through like 200 pages without even meaning to. It is a book that you can absolutely get lost in. The character of Jane is so fascinating, and I absolutely loved her and related to her. I know she is an unreliable narrator, but I think she was just so wonderful. I loved that this was actually a conversation with Jane Austen. If you didn't know that, this is like answering Jane Austen's books, which we talked a lot about, which I thought was fascinating. I love that we follow two ugly characters. I just think that's amazing. And I love the mystery, all of the stuff that comes out of this book. I had no clue that this was going to be so like kind of spooky and gothic. Yeah, I absolutely love this book. So amazing. I can't believe it took me until 2020 to read this. I've been getting recommended this for years. It was like my ex-best friend's like favorite book of all time, like in like middle school and high school. And it was one of my mom's favorite books. Like, how did I only just read that book? Alright, and now we are getting into the top of the top. Ooh, oh my gosh, let's go. I'm worried that this book is so high because I read it recently, but I don't care. It's going here. I have Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue. Who doesn't have this on their favorite books of the year? Oh my god, everyone is obsessed with this, and I 100% agree. It's an absolutely incredible book. I'm absolutely in love with it. I think it was Gabby Reed's said that this book makes you feel nostalgic for something that you didn't experience, and I 100% agree with that. This has such an amazing atmosphere, and just like, it makes you feel so many things. Complete disclaimer, I hate V.E. Schwab books. I love her as a person, and I constantly want to pick up her books because they sound amazing. I have DNF or 1-starred every single book by her. So I was I wanted to read this book so bad, but I was very nervous about it, and I'm so happy to be showing it on my favorite books of the year list. This book, if you somehow don't know, follows a young girl named Addie LaRue who gets a curse put upon her by the devil, that she will live forever, but everyone who meets her will forget about her. So, you know, she walks into a room, talks to someone, or even spends an entire day or night with someone, and then once they go to sleep and open their eyes, or, you know, leave the room and come back, they do not know who she is. But then one day in a bookstore, she comes across a boy who remembers her. Oh my gosh. I just thought that this book was so fantastic in the sense that both of the characters, Addie and Henry, both have such complex, deep, meaningful backstories and personalities and interests and like their own lives. And then when they come together, they have such amazing chemistry, and their stories intertwining just makes it so much more like spectacular. And the ending of this book. Oh my gosh. One of my favorite endings of the year. You guys know I am a sucker for endings. If an ending is interesting to me, like again I talked about with Perfume, if an ending doesn't wrap up super perfectly, or if it's a sad ending or an angry ending, oh, I love it so much more than just a perfect little bow happy ending. So yeah. The ending of this book is one of my all-time favorites. Absolutely love it. The next book is another one that is a quite recent read, but this book I feel like is so high because I literally finished this book and I was like, did this author write this book for me? Like, this book was written for me. And that is Leave the World Behind by Ruman Alam. This has everything I could ever ask for in a book. I can't even tell you what this book is about. The basic premise is that a family goes on vacation. And that's about it. I wouldn't call this horror, really. It's kind of horror. It's more terror. What I always try to explain to people and people don't understand, terror and horror are two different things. Terror is the build-up, the suspense. It is the walking down the hall with the creepy music playing, and horror is the jump scare. It's the spooky thing that's happening. This is the best terror and suspense I've ever read, and it's amazing. I think this book is also so incredibly realistic that if this situation was happening, this is how it would actually happen. And I also absolutely love the writing style. This might be my favorite writing style I have read ever. I think this writing is just amazing. It's very simplistic, but also very detailed and says exactly what it needs to say, if that makes sense. I just thought that this was amazing. And the ending, again, the ending, oh my gosh, perfect. Perfect. I know so many people will hate the ending. I loved it so much. Also, this book has deer. it has fucking spooky deer. Like, it was written for me. Next up, we have the book that I was so convinced for half of the year was going to be my favorite book of the year. And then I ended up reading 2 books back to back that are actually my favorite books of the year. And I was like, crap, I need to reread that book to decide where it's gonna go. But this was my favorite book of the year for like literally 6 or 7 months. And that is The Immortalist by Chloe Benjamin. This is a book that so many people hate, and I don't know why. A lot of people say that they don't like it because it was marketed as not what it really is. A lot of people were expecting more magical realism going into this book, and it's really not magical realism. Basically, we follow 4 kids in New York City and their siblings, and they go to this fortune teller. And this fortune teller tells them when they're going to die. And basically we follow, each section follows a different sibling up until their death. And it was so interesting. I just thought it was so fascinating to watch this happen and watch how certain people live their lives because of these prophecies. And it's kind of the whole question of like, if you knew exactly when you were gonna die, what would you do? So, you know, we have the boy who was told that he was gonna die really, really young, and like what he decides to do with that information. And also kind of, there's also like this question of like, does being told this prophecy push you to actually die on that day? Because, you know, like suicide or something like that. But yeah, I thought that this was so wonderful. And although it's not actual magical realism, I still felt that this book had such a magical atmosphere to it. I absolutely did not like any of these siblings, and I think a lot of people also really need to like their main characters, but like I don't think any of these people are necessarily supposed to be likable. But yeah, there are certain parts of this book that are forever ingrained in my brain that I will remember forever, and I just absolutely loved it. I know, I guess not for everyone, but it's so good. Actually, you know, I feel like I should put this higher. I am literally sitting here right now and I feel like I should put this higher. I feel like this should be like number 3, maybe? Yeah, editing Kate put this at number 3. And now we are down to the top 2 books. Oh my gosh. So these 2 books, I literally have sat on wondering which one should be number 1 and which one should be number 2 for 6 months. And I finally picked. Who knows, I might regret this in 6 months, but this is what I have decided on. So we're gonna go for number 2. My number 2 favorite book of the year is Drive Your Plow Over the Bones of the Dead by Olga Tokarczuk. Oh my gosh, I love this book so much. This is, again, a book that feels like it was written for me. I have literally just been obsessed with this book since I read it. Olga Tokarczuk is definitely an author that I discovered this year and has become an absolute favorite author of all time. I've read 3 of her books so far and given all of them 5 stars. This book. So basically, we follow an older woman who lives in the middle of nowhere, kind of off the grid in the middle of the woods. And in these woods, people keep getting murdered. So, you know, at the very beginning of the book, she gets called up by her neighbor being like, hey, I haven't seen our other neighbor who, you know, lives 5 miles away in a while. Like, maybe we should go check on him. And they go and check on him and find him dead. And then a while later, you know, a police officer is killed, a hunter is killed, a bunch of men keep getting killed, and this old woman is trying to tell everyone that she thinks nature is coming for man. She thinks that nature's animals are getting back at men who have harmed it. So, you know, people who have hunted, or people who have killed things, or people who have knocked down trees, or anything like that. And obviously no one believes her because she's kind of known as the crazy woman. And also, why would animals be killing people? They're not sentient enough to understand that. But she keeps going to the murder scenes and seeing that there are, you know, deer hoof prints, and a lot of other little animal tracks all around the murder scenes. So it's so good. I just thought that this book was so excellently done. The writing is some of the most beautiful I've ever read. It's just so good. It's so perfect in every way you could ever think of. I love the ending. I love the mystery. I love the point of view that we're reading from. I love everything about this. I like that it's a little bit spooky, a little bit literary. I think that's my perfect go-to, is like literary horror, because I would consider this horror. It's again kind of like a murder mystery, and it's very, very spooky and very much like you have no clue what's happening until you know what's happening. And I just think Olga did an amazing job with this. So, that is my number 2 pick of 2020. I mean, if you follow me and you still haven't picked up this book, I don't know what you're doing, so. I hope that means you all know what number 1 is. The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky. Oh my god. I feel like I haven't shut up about this book since I read it back in June. This is one of my new favorite books of all time. Like, I mean, a lot of these books are new favorite books of all time, but this one, it just holds such a special place in my heart. This one I really want to reread in 2021 because I was not expecting to love this book as much as I did when I first went into it. So it definitely took me like 100 pages to really like savor and enjoy it rather than just kind of like reading it like I would read a book for class or something. Okay, so basically we follow a boy named Prince Mishkin who is coming back from Switzerland where he was getting some mental therapy and also physical therapy because he has epilepsy and he was having seizures. And he is coming back to Russia. And when he gets to Russia, he basically gets involved in a ton of Russian aristocracy and higher up the hierarchy, a bunch of different people. And basically, I've been told by so many people that I interpreted this book wrong, and I don't really care. I can interpret a book however the fuck I want, but I see this book as being about Prince Mishkin, who is autistic. The autism rep in this book, it might have been accidental, but it was some of the best autistic rep I've ever seen in my life, and it made me so happy. This book is so weirdly heartwarming. I just loved it so much. Prince Mishkin is one of my favorite characters of all time now. He's just so pure and innocent and wonderful and just, I just wish everyone was like him. He's just such a wonderful human being. And I loved seeing the character development of those around him. A lot of the characters start out as like terrible people, and not to say they're not terrible by the end, but a lot of them, you can just watch the growth of them as they get to know and interact with Prince Mishkin. This is just such a wonderful book. It just, again, it's so heartwarming and just beautiful, and it just made me feel so warm on the inside. That's the only way I can describe it. I also loved learning more about Russia and Russian politics. Russia is something that is a place I've never really learned about. I haven't read much like Russian literature. I haven't read any Tolstoy, and now after this book I've only also read Brothers Karamazov, so I don't know much about Russia. We didn't really cover it that much in my school either, so I just don't know that much about Russia. So learning about kind of the aristocracy of Russia and like rich people in Russia was fascinating to me. And again, I just thought so many of these characters were so fantastic. Prince Mishkin is the most innocent, pure little being I've ever experienced in my life, and I loved reading about every single one of them. I feel like, again, like the first 100 pages are so etched in my brain because it took me so long to read them, and then like the rest of the book I barely remember because I literally read, how long is this book? Like 500, almost 600 pages. I think I read like 400 of those pages in like 2 days. I was so obsessed with this book. I absolutely could not put it down. And I am absolutely in love with everything about this. The writing also, can we just talk about that? Fyodor Dostoevsky, amazing writer. Like, I know, he's a classic. But like, I'm sorry, a lot of classic writers are boring as hell, way too flowery, way too wordy, and just boring. But holy shit, Fyodor Dostoevsky is an amazing writer. He is so good at developing characters and plot, and also this is very much a character-driven story, I would call it, but also everything about it was so interesting. Like, it never felt like it was dragging because it was only focusing on characters. And yeah, I feel like I have pushed this book so hard for this entire year, the last 6 months of this year, because I read it in June, that I really hope you guys pick it up. and I really hope you love it. A lot of people have asked me about this edition. This is the Wordsworth Classic Edition. It was literally $3 on Amazon. I have heard that this translation isn't the best, but I personally didn't see anything wrong with it. Of course, I don't speak Russian, and I don't know what the original text is supposed to say, but I thought this was very accessible and very easy to read, and it completely made sense like the entire time. And overall, this was just so fun. Just so fun and so great. Oh, I'm sorry, I should stop talking about this book. Yes, The Idiot by Fyodor Dostoevsky is my favorite book of 2020. Oh my gosh. I feel like this year I just read so many amazing books, and so many books that are going to stay with me for the rest of my life. And this one is no exception to that. This one I am probably going to talk about for the rest of my life and talk about as a favorite. So yeah, there you go. So yes, those are all of my favorite books of 2020. I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and definitely tell me down in the comments below what was your favorite book of 2020. Also tell me down below if I got you to read any of these books over the course of 2020, because I always love hearing that I actually inspired people to read. But anyways, I hope you guys all enjoyed this video, and I love you all, and I'll see y'all soon. Bye!